Alright, so today we're going to be going over how to change the tire on the rear motor of the 2Swift board. So the first thing you're going to want to do is remove the front bumper. So we call this the front bumper. There's 3 fasteners on the front bumper in the front here. These are T20 Torx. And so you want to take these 3 screws out, and then there's 1 screw on the bottom in the center here. That's a T20 as well. So remove those 4 screws total, and then you'll be able to pull off the front bumper like that. So the next step is going to be removing the deck. There's going to be 3 screws on each chassis rail, 1 here, 1 in the middle, and 1 back here. These are T25 Torx, and then it'll be the same on the other side. So you want to remove those 6 fasteners, and then you can remove the deck off the top. So once you have the deck removed, now you can see the inside of the board. This is your motor controller, and this is where your motor wires are coming into the board. So this is going to be the next step, is disconnecting the motor wires from the controller so you can take the motor off the board. So you're going to have 3 phase wires, a yellow, blue, and a green. What you want to do is you want to mark these phase wires so that the motor phase goes back to the same controller phase when you put the board back together. So we usually take some different colored electrical tape. So we got red and red, so we know these 2 go together. We pull those apart. Orange, orange, pull those apart, and then these 2 you can just leave black, pull those apart. So those are your phase wires, and then this is your hall sensor connection here on the controller. So this you can nice and gently pull out of the controller. So that'll come out like that. So now your motor wires are disconnected from the controller. Just gonna clean these up a little bit. Through the hole. So the next step is going to be to essentially pull the wires through the rear wheel carrier, which is this blue plate, so we can essentially get the motor free and take it off the board. So there's a little rubber grommet in here that keeps the water out, so that you can kind of just pull back through. It'll pop through like that. And then you want to be real careful when fishing these wires through the hole in the rear wheel carrier so that you don't damage any of the sheathing. So we usually start with the phase wires, so we'll just do 1 at a time. Pop 1 through, and then each time you get 1 through, it kind of gets easier. This green one, green, and get the yellow. Okay, and then for the hall sensor connector, you kind of just not really bend it, but just turn it at an angle here, and you can kind of get it to fish through the hole. All right, so now we got the wires disconnected from the controller, and we're able to remove the rear wheel. So the rear wheel is attached. This is this 18 millimeter socket, and you're going to want to crack these nuts loose. That to keep the rear wheel on. So I already broke them loose. Just loosen those up a little bit, and then the wheel will slide out. Just give it a tap. And now you got your rear wheel assembly free from the board. That's step 1. So the first step in actually changing the tire, you're going to want to remove the valve cap. You're going to want to let as much air as possible out. For this, you can use something, just kind of a blunt object, and push the valve in and release the air pressure. If you already have a flat tire, it should be pretty flat by now. And then you're going to want to just break the bead. Usually you could do this by hand, but essentially just break the bead and loosen it up from the rim. So that's pretty loose. Tools you're going to need for this. To make this job easier, it's definitely nice to have a valve stem remover. This is off the top of a slime bottle. If you buy a slime bottle, the cap is usually a valve stem remover. You can also order these on Amazon. And then a good set of tire irons. These are from Amazon as well. 3 is usually the best way to go. So, and it's usually nice to have an extra set of hands for this. It can be difficult to do just by yourself. So step one, just get a tire iron in there and start to kind of want to try to get the bead to come over the rim, like that. Sometimes you can kind of work it off by hand. There we go. Try to do as much by hand as possible. It just kind of keeps you from scratching up the rim. So got the tire off, so now we're going to have a new tire. We're going to put that on. So the first thing I usually check is you want to make sure the tire orientation and the tread is going the right way. So a good way to check that is just to put the motor back in the board, like where the wires go into the hole, make sure everything's aligned, and then this is going to be your tread direction, so we know that it needs to go on like this. So you're going to want to get the first, I guess the first side of the bead kind of over the rim, and this you can usually just do by hand by just kind of pushing it on like that, and it'll pop on. So we got the first half of the bead over the rim, and now we're just working on getting the second half on. So I'm just going to work this by hand, just kind of tuck it on. All right, Jared, you put your hands, just kind of just hold it there and let me get the tire irons. So you're going to want to get one tire iron in there and just start kind of bending it over. It's really got to have two in there to keep the bead from kind of pulling back on you. All right, Jared, you hold those irons. And kind of the trick with the tires is the bead on the bottom side, if you push it up and into the middle of the rim, it really loosens up this side of the bead. So that's kind of the trick to like get it on with the minimal amount of tension on the tire. So I always try to keep the backside bead. So what I'm doing is just taking my hand, just pushing this backside bead towards the center of the rim, and that loosens up the tire. So now that I got it loose as much as possible, I'm just going to take small bites with the tire iron and just start kind of folding it on. Jared, just hold her steady. See, it'll start to pull over on you. All right, so now then we'll take this one out. Jared, switch me. You just got to fish these in here. Just do your best not to scrape anything, and you're just going to pull it on, and it'll pop on. So not too bad. It makes it a lot easier to have an extra set of hands. All right, so I've got the tires. It's on there, but the bead hasn't seated into the rim yet, so that's the next step. With the tubeless tires, you're going to want to have an air compressor and probably a blowgun to get a high flow rate into this tire to get it to pop on. Otherwise, if you just have a low flow pump or some kind of like battery compressor, it's not going to have enough flow rate to get the bead to set onto the rim. So what we usually do is using the valve stem removal tool. We'll take out the valve stem. We'll take the valve out of the valve stem, and these just unscrew. So you get that out of there, and what that'll do is allow you to put more flow into the tube or into the rim and get the tire to seat. All right, so now we got the valve out of the valve stem, and we have a blowgun just hooked up to the shop air compressor. I think we're running about 120 psi, and we're just going to put this into the valve and just kind of give it slow puffs of air, and you'll hear it. It'll pop the bead onto the rim, but you don't want to hammer this. You can't really take that much air. So now that kind of just popped the bead on, and the bead's set. So we'll go ahead and put the valve back in, screw it back in with the valve tool, and this just, you don't got to crank these super tight, just by hand, just get it snug in there, and there you go. Okay, and now you can use an air chuck for inflating a tire. Go ahead and hook this up to your thing. Okay, doesn't take much air. We usually run these about 35 pounds. So I'll check it one more time. So that still needs a little more. 40. Let a little bit out. Okay. So your new tire's on. Go ahead and put your cover back on the valve. And now you're ready to reinstall the rear wheel. So now we're back on the board. Okay. So the easiest way that we found to do this is to put the board on some kind of surface that you can work on, and that will have some protection for the battery. We'll go ahead and just flip the chassis over, like so. And then you're gonna drop the wheel back in to the slot. So the key with this is that you got the wire on the right side that lines up with the hole in the rear wheel carrier, and these little washers have like a tab on them, and the tab slides into the bottom of the rear wheel carrier like that, so that will help support the torque of the motor so it doesn't want to twist or round out these slots. So the washers go on the inside. Make sure your nuts are nice and loose. So your washers are going to go on the inside like this, and it should slide in to the bottom of that slot. And you want to make sure that it's slid all the way down and it's even on both sides. So now that that's in, you can snug up your nuts by hand, and then you can torque down the rear wheel nuts. So we torque these down to 65 Newton meters. And this helps to have an extra set of hands or some kind of clamp on the board so you can actually apply a good torque to it. So I'm just going to torque these down right now. I'm not using a torque wrench at the moment, but you'll want to use a torque wrench. Got the rear wheel reinstalled. Go ahead and flip the board back over. And now we're going to work on getting the wires back into the controller. Okay. So this is the exact opposite of the removal process. So you're going to want to put the hall sensor connection in first. And again, that thing's got a slight bend on it. We're just going to kind of fish it through the hole, being real gentle not to damage any of the wires. Got that through. Take the first phase wire, fish that through. Second phase wire, fish that through. Third phase wire, fish that through. Okay, we got all of our wires coming in. Just be real gentle. Just pull them through, nice and easy. Now we want to get this grommet sealed back in the hole. So the best way I found to do this is slide the grommet forward on this wire sheathing, and then just kind of pull it through, and you'll see it pop through like that, and it'll hook in. And then just kind of lightly pull on this wire, so you kind of have, you don't want it super tight, but you want it to be, clean and neat back there. Okay, so now we can go ahead and reconnect the phase wires. So we have these tapes, so we know exactly where they go. Orange to orange, black to black, red to red. Remove this. Kind of have the tape removed on your phase wires. You can go ahead and plug your hall sensor connector back into the controller. So this will only go in one way. These little ridges, these are going to be facing down, and you want to push this in back into the hall sensor connection and the controller, and make sure that that's firmly pressed in all the way. And I usually kind of look to see if there's any silver from the connectors sticking out. If there is, I'll just push them in with a this is just a little pick, and just push them in a little bit, make sure they're seated all the way in there. Good. Okay, and then we put some tape, some electrical tape over the motor phase wires connections, just so they don't loosen up over time and that there's no possibility that they'll short together. So you want to do this for all three. I'm just going to do one right now to show you, but just where the connection comes together, short piece of black electrical tape, wrap it nice and tight, and you'll want to do that to all three motor phases, and then you can tuck those kind of back down to where they go. So all your connections are made. At this point, we recommend turning the board on with the remote and just making sure that the motor spins up and it brakes like it should. If for any reason you have some kind of clogging or something like that, there'd probably be an indication that your phase wires were installed to the wrong phases. So you want to double check that, or that you may have some loose connections with the hall sensor connection. So once you're back at this stage, you're going to put the deck back on. So make sure your wires aren't going to get pinched when the deck goes back on, that they're down in this cavity. Slide the deck on like so. You want to push it back first and then drop it down. And you can go ahead and flip the board over. You're going to run your 6 T25s back to screw the deck on. And while the board's still flipped over, go ahead, take your front bumper, slide that back on the front. Usually start with the center screw, T20, and then these two T20s, and then finally the T20 in the middle. So you're going to notice these three are going to be shorter than this one. So the long one goes in the center here on the bottom, and snug this back up. These are all just hand tightened with the T20 Torx. And that's it. After you have that done, you should be ready to ride again.